Hi, boys and girls. It's time for another story from Taylor's Bible Story Book. Let's see. Today is story number 16. Jacob leaves home. As Jacob traveled, he had a dream one night. He thought he saw some stairs in front of him reaching to heaven, and angels going up and down them. God stood at the top of the stairs and told Jacob about the country he was going to give him and his children. And God said he would be with Jacob and take care of him wherever he went and would bring him safely home again. Jacob woke up and was afraid because God had been there and he had spoken to him. So very early the next morning he got up and he worshiped the Lord. He called the place Bethel, which means the house of God. Jacob promised that if God would take care of him, he would give him enough food and clothes and would keep him from harm until he got back to his father's home again. And then he would obey God and give him a tenth of everything that he had. Jacob meant that he would help the poor and the sick, and his money would build altars and would sacrifice burnt offerings. That's the way he would give a tenth of all that he had to God. Jacob kept traveling a long, long time until he came to Haran, where Laban lived. He saw a well there in the field, 3 flocks of sheep lying around it, and the shepherds with their flocks. A large rock was rolled over the mouth of the well to cover it, which all the flocks arrived each evening. The shepherds would roll away the stone and get water for the sheep. Afterwards, the stone would be rolled back over the mouth of the well again. Jacob asked the shepherds where they lived, and they told him at Haran. "Do you know Laban?" he asked them. "Yes," they said, "we surely do." Jacob asked if he was well. "Yes, he is," they replied. "And look, here comes his daughter, Rachel, with his sheep." Jacob went over to the well and he kissed Rachel, then rolled away the stone and watered her sheep for her. He explained to her that he was her cousin, her Aunt Rebekah's son, and she ran to tell her father. When Laban heard that his nephew had arrived, he ran over to meet him. He gave him a warm welcome and brought him home. After Jacob had been there a month, Laban asked him to stay and to work for him. By this time, Jacob was very much in love with Rachel, and he told Laban that he would work for him for 7 years if he could marry Rachel afterwards. Laban was delighted, so Jacob worked for him for the next 7 years. Even though it was a long time, the years went by fast. They seemed like only a few days to Jacob because he loved Rachel so much. But when the time was up, Laban would not let him marry Rachel. He said her older sister Leah should be married first, so Jacob had to marry her in order to marry Rachel afterwards. He had to work 7 more years for Rachel. This was very unfair of Jacob's uncle. But Jacob agreed to it because of his love for Rachel. So he stayed and he worked 7 years more, and both Leah and Rachel were his wives. Afterwards, he married 2 more girls, and he had 4 wives in all. Jacob wanted to take his wives and his children back home to the land of Canaan to see if his father and his mother were still alive. He also thought that perhaps after all this time, Esau would forgive him for stealing his blessing. But Laban wouldn't let Jacob go. Laban said he realized that the Lord was blessing him because of Jacob's being there, and that he asked wages Jacob wanted in order to stay longer. Jacob said that if Laban would give him some of his sheep and his goats, that he would stay. So Laban did. Jacob's flock soon grew very large. After a while, he was rich, and he had many slaves and camels and donkeys, as well as large flocks of sheep. One day, Jacob heard Laban's sons talking angrily about him. They said that he had stolen their father's sheep, and that was why he was so rich. Jacob noticed that Laban was not as friendly to him as he used to be. Then God told Jacob to return home to his father in the land of Canaan. God said he would be with Jacob, and he would take care of him and keep him from harm. Jacob sent word for Rachel and Leah to meet him out in the field where he was caring for his flock. He wanted to talk to them where Laban couldn't hear what he said. He told him that their father wasn't friendly to him anymore and that the Lord had told him to go back to Canaan. Rachel and Leah both agreed that he must do whatever the Lord wanted him to do. And that's the end of Jacob Leaves Home. And here's a beautiful picture of Jacob with Rachel, who he loved dearly. All right, that's the end of today's story, boys and girls. And we'll join us. Hope you join us again next time for another story out of Taylor's Bible Storybook. See you later.